For all my years as an anime fan, for some reason or another, Death Note was always a series that kind of eluded me. I think it's because it was releasing when I was fresh out of high school, so my life was pretty chaotic and all over the place, and I completely missed out on its original run. Since then, it's always been one of those shows that I had planned on watching, but never got around to. But consistently, I see it being praised among anime and manga fans as one of the best that the medium has to offer. All I really knew about it was the general concept that there is some kind of enchanted notebook, and when someone's name is written in it, they die. And that was the extent of my knowledge. Which is cool and a terrifying concept, but I was curious how one could create an entire series from that concept alone. But when I saw the complete anime on Blu-ray for $15, I was like, you know what? I think it's time to see what everyone was talking about. So how does Death Note stack up in my opinion? Well, let's get into it. First off, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers to the best of my ability, but with as many twists and turns as Death Note has, it's kind of impossible to avoid altogether. So if you haven't seen Death Note and you want to know absolutely nothing, maybe save this video for another time. Like I said, I'll try to avoid the major spoilers the best I can for now, and I'll save that to the end of the video where I'll talk about some specific things that I want to dive into. First of all, Death Note takes place in what we would consider our real world, modern-day Japan, well, taking place in the year 2007 to begin with. But on the other side of what we know of our world, there exists some sort of world where beings called Shinigami live. Which, just doing a quick Google search, so bear with me with the information, but basically they come from Japanese folklore and are demon-like entities that influence people towards their deaths. How that's interpreted here in the story is that each Shinigami has with them a death note, a notebook that when someone's name is written in it, that person will die within 40 seconds of either a heart attack or the cause of death must be written and explained in detail after the name. Though many Shinigami exist, the main one that we follow is this one called Ryuk, who wants to have some excitement in his life and decides to travel to the human world and drop a death note to see what would happen. The funny thing is that Ryuk really has no other objective than just, for lack of a better word, killing time. He's not here directly to harm anyone or to help anyone, he's just kind of there. And when our main character, Light Yagami, picks up the Death Note, Ryuk hangs around him simply explaining the lore of the book, talking with him, and eating a bunch of apples. I don't think the word haunt really applies since Ryuk is very casual, but he's basically meant to follow the owner of the notebook around until the owner dies. And in the meantime, he sometimes obeys what Light tells him to do, other times he just acts aloof and floats around spinning in the air, or he's just nowhere to be seen. And I think it's really funny because you expect the unhuman thing in the story to be the antagonist or a monster, but really Ryuk's whole thing is just to kind of sit back and let the humans destroy themselves. Kind of that age-old tale that it's always the humans who will hate and destroy one another. Meanwhile, the Shinigami, a god of death so to speak, really doesn't care one way or another. Ryuk doesn't really have a personal attachment to anything, he just sort of hangs out. In fact, there's even other Shinigami introduced in the story that actively begin to care about the human that they're attached to with the notebook, so these creatures of death showcase the ability to learn, grow, and even care, whereas on the human side, we watch the characters deteriorate, lie, cheat, and break each other down more and more as the story goes on. But the story is not about the Shinigami or Ryuk at all. The story is about a guy named Light Yagami, the protagonist of the story in the general sense of being the main character. And after receiving the notebook, Light decides to use its power to kill criminals and all of the horrible people in the world. Murderers, rapists, drug dealers, and everything like that. Basically beginning the story, I guess you could say, as chaotic good. Kind of like the Punisher, except instead of using guns and hunting his victims down, he looks up the recent convicts on the news or on the internet and writes down their names. Oh, also as part of the rules, you have to know their real name and be thinking of their face when you write it down. There's a lot of little intricate rules of the notebook, but I'm not going to go into all that here. But basically, I'm saying you have to know what they look like. Anyways, the initial premise of the show went as I expected it to, but this is only for the first few episodes. The story really gets moving once we meet the character of L. And how do you describe L? He's an absolute genius, intuitive, the most brilliant detective of all time, and also probably deeply autistic. That's not mentioned in the anime, but he does have many little tics. He gets hyper-focused, he sits in odd positions, and has an extreme lack of social skills. So yeah, I'm leaning towards that. But once Light begins to kill all of these people who all die by heart attacks, the police catch on that something weird is happening behind the scenes, and someone is actively doing all these killings. So L is brought in to help them take on the case and figure out who is killing all of these people and how. And the killings get so out of hand and known around the world that people begin to both fear and praise the one that's doing it, whom they codename Kira. So we have those who believe Kira is doing good for the world, and those who believe that he's a vigilante that needs to be stopped. And here is where it gets really interesting, because although Light begins his crusade with, let's say, good intentions, he then begins to understand that the investigation is drawing closer towards him, and Light himself is also a certified genius, and this is where the series thrives. It's the conflict between Light and L. Both of them are on a mission to fulfill their goals that are within direct opposition to one another. And unlike Battle Shonen, where physical fights break out constantly, these two rivals are using their intellect to try to plan ahead, lie, outwit, and outdo one another, and it's all about who can keep a straight face longer. It's about looking at how the other person would most likely react to a situation and get ahead of it. Manipulation, fear tactics, probabilities, it all keeps going back and forth. And at times, Light is on top of the situation, keeping L and the investigation team off of his back, and other times L brings forth such strong evidence that they start to believe Light might really be Kira after all. Oh, and I forgot to mention that Light's father is a police officer, so this is what leads Light to joining the investigation himself, literally working with the police to find Kira, who is Light himself. And the extent at which Light goes to not get caught is really what brings the moral ambiguity in with what some consider a great transition from a hero character to a villain. Because as people get closer to being able to identify Light, in order to cover his own ass, he uses the Death Note over and over again to kill anybody that gets close to discovering his secret, starting to kill basically innocent people only because they may hold some evidence that would lead towards the police finding out who Kira is. And honestly, while watching this, it really reminded me of another show called Breaking Bad. Now, I'm not saying Death Note's writing and character development is as good as Breaking Bad. That's a pretty tall and impossible order, but Light as a character really reminded me a lot of Walter White, because Walter in Breaking Bad also begins his criminal activity with quote-unquote good intentions, but the deeper he gets into it, the more that black and white turns into shades of gray, and Walter, also a character built from his above-average intelligence, constantly must lie, create up stories, backstab people, and kill in order to keep himself out of trouble. Both Walter, an older man, and Light, a skinny teenage boy, not physically strong, but all but unbeatable when it comes to lies and manipulation. The lengths they will go to stay out of jail and continue to do the things that they do is terrifying, and as you watch as this character that you may have been connected with at the beginning of the series turns into an absolute monster by the end. It's like everyone else is just a pawn on their board in order for them to achieve their goals, even if it's their own friends, family, or girlfriend. And speaking of girlfriend, we have to talk about Misa Amane. Okay, look. Misa is an S-tier waifu. I said it, and I don't care what any of you say. Misa is freaking fantastic. I love her. She's amazing. And why? Let me tell you. Well, first off, what is the top quality that I look for in a woman? It is loyalty. Absolutely 100%. I need me a ride or die kind of chick, and Misa is that to an absolute T. You ask her to jump off a bridge or sacrifice half of her lifespan to get some Shinigami eyes so that she can help you kill someone, she's gonna do it. Now look, I would never ask her to do such a thing. I want Misa to live a long, happy life by my side, but the willingness to do it, to help me achieve my goals, is the hottest thing that I can imagine. She loves Light with all of her heart, and she's vastly territorial of him, which I also find super attractive. Is that weird? I don't know. Girls that are prideful to be with you, there's something really hot about that. But anyways, And again, even while dating Misa, Light used her for her abilities, and he saw another girl on the side whom he was also using to achieve his goals. Light's kind of an asshole by that point in the series, we get that, but Misa is adorable until the end. She's high energy, which I find endearing and cute, and let's not forget she's a medium titty goth babe, which is exactly up my alley. I swear, I don't have a type. Yeah. Anyways, Misa is precious, adorable, and must be protected at all costs. I will hear no Misa slander here. She's a goth princess, and dear God, I think we all need a Misa in our lives. But anyways, next I have to jump into spoilers for a bit, so I'll talk in detail about particular scenes or events in the series. So again, this is your chance to leave the video if you've never seen Death Note before or care about spoilers. Anyway, there are a lot of rules with the Death Note that come into play throughout the course of the series, and I think one of my favorite moments of the series is when, to prove his innocence, Light actually relinquishes his ownership of the notebook, which I had no idea you could do, but in doing so, you lose all of the memories of using it. So Light didn't even remember that he was Kira. So this meant that he could pass any kind of test as to discovering if he is Kira because he literally wouldn't remember. But the thing that I loved about it was the foresight that Light had, because he specifically made sure that a book went to someone whom him and L working together, they would eventually be able to track down, someone who wasn't as smart or forward-thinking as Light was. And upon placing his hand on the notebook again, all of his memories would flood back. And by the point that he does it in the series, he has cleared his name, and L is even in a better position to eventually be killed by him. So when he gets that notebook back, I legit jumped out of my seat. It was such a hype moment, definitely a highlight of the series for me. There's also several scenes that show just how far Light has fallen into his own ideals and to stay out of trouble. There's the scene early on where he kills an innocent woman who just barely had any information that might lead towards him. But later on in the series, when his sister is kidnapped, he literally contemplates killing her just to protect himself. And when his father is dying in the hospital, instead of really caring, he's just trying to get his dad to write a name in the notebook because he doesn't know the name himself, and it's the only way to kill Mello, who was after him at that point. And the fact that he eventually just got other people to do his killing for him, like Misa being one of them, Kiyomi, the other girl he was with, that he gets to kill for her and then kills her when she's no longer useful. And then Taro, who looked up to him as a god, and he used him to write the names in the book for him, but then in the final episode, he sells him out to try to stay out of trouble. It just gets crazy. I will say, though, if there's anything I didn't like about the series, it deals with the final third of the show. There is a moment where Light figures out a way to take out two birds with one stone. He doesn't know L's real name, but a Shinigami can see everybody's names, and so he puts Misa in a compromising position to be caught. And in order to protect her, her Shinigami kills L, which, if a Shinigami kills someone in order to save a human, they also die. And look, the moment of L dying was legendary. It was a great scene. It was a great moment. It was another epic win for Light that I didn't see coming. But then the series time skips ahead a few years, and we get two new characters introduced, Mello and N, who are basically L's successors. And they don't work together, but in opposition to each other. But they just don't compare to L. I don't think they were meant to, I understand that, but you know how some shows have that one character that dies and afterwards it really takes a dive, or it loses something really special about itself? That's kind of what happened here. N doesn't have nearly as interesting of a persona as L did, but he retains his intelligence, and it's kind of a way to keep L in the story without him actually being there. And I kind of would have liked it better if they created a different type of character rather than just an L clone, because it felt like it was L, but not really. You know, all the fun things about L were taken away, and it was just sort of like a copy of L. And I understand that L would have a contingency plan that upon his death that it would fall to his successors, but these guys were just not it for me. They were kind of like the Kmart version of L. Anyways, though, the final episode was really enjoyable. Light is finally exposed in front of everyone, and seeing him squirming and trying to come up with a way to get out of the situation was almost hard to watch. To see someone who was so on top of everything for so long to finally reach his breaking point and still almost get a victory. I also loved how this supporting character named Matsuda was the one who put the bullets into Light. I'm not saying Matsuda wasn't an important character in the series before this, but he was also kind of the innocent one in the background that was always going along with all the plans, and the one who trusted Light up until this final episode. So I just thought it was a really nice touch that he was the one to kind of like put the bullets into Light. Overall, I think Death Note really lived up to its expectations. It might not have cracked my top 10 or anything, but I think this is a very solid series that goes at an incredible pace. It's one that trusts the intelligence of its audience, which I appreciate, and as the characters piece things together, so are we as the audience. It's the kind of show where you really have to pay attention, and you can't miss one episode. Some of the cliffhangers at the end of the episodes, too, really hype you up to watch the next one. This is definitely going to be a series that I go back to, and I'm sure once I rewatch it one day, I'll discover a bunch of new stuff that I missed the first time around. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think about Death Note down below in the comments, all your thoughts, theories, and opinions. Also tell me, just how long into the series were you on Light's side? Were you ever on his side just in the beginning, or were you with Light up until the bitter end? Let me know that in the comments. Other than that, guys, please like this video if you enjoyed this review, sub the channel for more anime, manga, movie, and existential life dread content. Also, my social media links are down below where you can follow me in the description. Other than that, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and if you find a mysterious black notebook on the ground someday, grab that shit.